it's mostly a geoeconomic energy partnership, much more than a geopolitical alliance or a military alliance. This is also included, of course. But I think from the beginning, we were talking about the importance of the international north-south transportation corridor in signing the whole thing, because the Russians are going to invest in rubles a lot of money to have the corridor completed as fast as possible. On the Russian side, it's very easy, because basically it's from St. Petersburg to Astrakhan by rail. They already have that. But the Iranians need investment, navigation across the Caspian Sea, and obviously other literal Caspian members are interested as well, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, etc. And of course, building highways from north to south of Iran, and then the infrastructure of ports in the south of Iran to go to Mumbai. To Mumbai. The Indians are paying attention to that as well, because for the Indians, their Silk Road, or let's say their Silk Road 2.0, is the port of Chabahar, south of Iran. The same thing, not very far from Gwadar port in Pakistan. For the Indians, the first Indian idea was, okay, we're going to use Chabahar to build our maritime and then overland Silk Road. So, you leave Mumbai, you go to Chabahar. From Chabahar, there is a highway that they built, by the way, to the Afghan border. And then we have access to Afghanistan and to Central Asia. So this is progressing very, very slowly. There was a lot of American pressure against it, etc. But now the Indians have a second possibility of a Silk Road, which is Mumbai, ports, Bandar Abbas and others in southern Iran, and then from Iran to the Caspian as a whole, and the Caspian littoral states, and Russia. So the Indians now, they can have West Asia and Central Asia as part of the Silk Roads that they dream of. And from an Indian point of view, because of this immensely complex India-China competition, for them this is perfect, because it allies them more closely geoeconomically with two fellow BRICS, which happen not to be China. And this is how the Indian ruling class thinks. This is really fascinating, because, but in the end, we have what? We have all these Silk Roads, horizontal and vertical and maritime in the rimland across the Indian Ocean, and northern in the northern Silk Road towards the Arctic. They are all progressing in parallel, but in many aspects, they are also converging. For instance, these Indian Silk Roads, they are converging in Iran, and even in parts of the Caspian, and even in Afghanistan, because Iran also exports to Afghanistan. Iran can export Indian goods to Afghanistan. And, coming from Mumbai to southern Iran and then to Afghanistan, it's I think this road is a little over 100 kilometers. It's very, very close to the Afghan border, And at the same time, the Indians open Central Asian markets for them, which are essentially Russian and Chinese territory, So you see a lot of overlapping. You see a lot of competition, of course, but a lot of overlapping and intersecting as well. And that's what makes it so fascinating. And obviously, the overall picture is that the US is completely absent of all these connectivity corridors, completely, totally out of all these connectivity corridors. So what does that tell us? It tells us that all these different parts of Asia, East Asia, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, they are integrating inside themselves and with the other neighbors. And this was the original idea of the Silk Roads, of the Chinese Silk Roads. When the Chinese came up with the Silk Road concept, 2013, in the beginning, they were not very audacious. I remember very well. The other day, I was compiling old stuff, and I saw my first Silk Road article, which was written a few days after Xi Jinping inaugurated Silk Roads in Astana. Yeah. And they were relatively shy at the moment, but the main idea was already there. We want to link our western part of China, Xinjiang, with our neighbors. But then after a few years, the whole thing went all over the place, because it was our neighbors, was our southern neighbors, was northern neighbors, Trans-Siberian, Europe, you name it, right? And now we have the Shanghai port in Peru, which is the maritime Silk Road in the South Pacific, which is something absolutely extraordinary. But at the time, they were, okay, at least we should have more closer relationship with our neighbors in Central Asia. And now look at what's going on now, less than 12 years after the start of the Silk Road. And very, very important to all of you, our audience, the planning for the new Silk Roads goes all the way to 2049. They planned in stages. It's typical Chinese 5-year plans and targets. So just to give you an idea, they start thinking about implementation of the new Silk Roads only 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, it was always pre-planning, planning, starting works, etc. So now the real work of building all these nodes of interconnecting nations, ports, corridors, inland ports, you name it, it's starting only now. So this tells us about a socialist government that thinks about the future and plans for the future, not like in America where they cannot even plan for next week. That's how the Chinese do things. And that's how the Russians are starting to. The Russians are not thinking along these lines. They are starting to think along these lines when we see what they are planning for as the Siberia and the Arctic. They want to do what the Chinese did to Xinjiang and then expand into the Silk Roads, to develop the whole of the Far East in Russia and the whole of the Arctic. It's mind-boggling, the scope, the depth, the reach, and the seriousness of central governments, because this is being coordinated in Russia federally by Moscow. Of course, all the regional governments, all the provinces, but they all say, when you talk to them in Russia, they say, no, look at the investments from Moscow in all our projects and all that.
I mean, we just put these two things together, Pepe. You have what you just described with Russia, the China Belt and Road Initiative, which is massive now. But, now people on Xiaohongshu are learning about China's economy, learning about how China is doing. Americans have been learning about this. And the numbers just today, 12 million new urban jobs in China alone. In the United States, we can't even get 100,000, 200,000 at any given point. In a year, in a month. And believe me, the population, while there's a population difference, it is not proportional. 12 million new jobs versus 200,000.
Exactly.
And that just goes to show everything that you're saying, Pepe. And, when you put the strategic partnership together, Russia, Iran, and you talk about the way that China is doing the Belt and Road Initiative, the New Silk Road, these things feel unstoppable. They feel very planned, and they feel from my perspective, as the basis for why I believe Donald Trump's move to the Western Hemisphere, while it will happen and there will be moves, these projects are just intolerable to the empire of chaos. Correct, Pepe? Yeah. So how do you see that playing out now in this year of BRICS?
I tried to address this in my previous column, or two previous columns. The swing states, which were identified a year and a half ago by the U.S. think tank Land, and they're all BRICS or BRICS partners or crypto BRICS. Brazil, India, and South Africa, Turkey, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. At the time, we were 6. Now they probably will be talking about 9 or 10. And there will be different levels of hybrid war and destabilization attempts on all these. There's no question about that. I've been trying to warn the Brazilians about it. Very few people in Brazil are paying attention to this, seriously. But Brazil is one of the top targets because the Americans absolutely need Brazil under their wing in the Western Hemisphere. It's a must. Argentina is a distant second, And Indonesia, wow. Remember when they had an easy ride with Suharto, right, Danny? These days are over. Bye-bye. We'll never be back to Suharto as a number one imperial asset. It's over. And the Indonesian ruling class is starting to develop a mentality that they are starting to believe that they are a big, big power of the future, one of them. And you didn't have that, for instance, let's say until the 2000s, until 15 years ago or so. Now it's a completely different story. It's fascinating to watch how it develops, And we didn't even talk about Vietnam, which is going to be a mega powerhouse of the 21st century. Ultra-educated population, cohesive, pre-planning, you name it.
Yeah, and almost secretly too firmly in the camp of the multipolar world, which most people don't think about because it's not talked about in the headlines or anything. But every move that it's made, from becoming a BRICS partner, its deep relationship with Russia, its growing trade with China, despite differences, growing and booming trade, all of it, it shows that it's going to be firmly in this, we're not going to call it a camp, but it's firmly on that path. It wants to be on the path of multipolarity, quite obviously.
Well,
and then, well, we're coming to a close, Pepe. And, just last word, if you want to have one on just what you said about Brazil. It's obvious that the Empire of Chaos wants to see Brazil look like Argentina. They want to see Brazil fall like a deck of cards and, maybe pull out of BRICS. Do you see that maybe in this year of BRICS and the Trump administration that some of these weaker nodes might be where the Trump administration, where the deep state, where the unipolar world tries to focus? Because right now it seems like Russia, China, even Iran seem like difficult players to topple.
Very hard nuts to crack. And I'm sure I would not say Trump, because Trump is not a strategist and he doesn't think geopolitically, it's a visceral, transactional, a cost benefit and all that. And these Republicans in think tanks, they are very parochial, provincial. They don't understand the other. They don't understand the world at large, you name it. So the level of analysis is not exactly sophisticated, So, but the only thing we can agree, all of us can agree on, is there's going to be hardcore hybrid war against all the major nodes. There's no question about that. And in terms of Russia and China, let's wait and see. I think it's too early to tell, because Trump himself may come to the conclusion that there's no way he can frontally attack Russia and China, especially at the same time, like those idiots were doing until last week. So he may come up with some sort of Trumpian arrangement with both. And of course, he will try divide and rule once again, because this is what the empire always does. But maybe with a Trumpian touch, trying to offer something. Okay, what could he possibly offer that the Russians will say, okay, we like it? The only thing he could offer is, okay, we sit on the same table and we talk about indivisibility of security. This will never happen coming from the US. And China, the Chinese, with their 5,000-year patience, they said, look, can we sit down and have some diplomacy, please?
Mhm.
Maybe some diplomacy. Yeah,
Right.
that's the best we can hope for.